jumping back into the action now, some more off-season grades. And when I saw I had more off-season grades, I realized in yesterday's episode I mentioned how that was the last one. Clearly, I was wrong. I just forgot, obviously, about the entire AFC West. So we're going to talk about them here, and this one will officially end the off-season grade series that I've been going through each division. But talking about the AFC West, a lot of not ideal situations, I would say. I don't want to call them completely bad, but in some of them, there is some pretty significant missing pieces to the entire operation. So without further ado, we will jump into that right away, starting off with none other than the Denver Broncos. We just finished talking about them and Courtland Sutton in a tough spot to be in overall. I had to give them a C just because I like the idea of them ripping off the bandage, cutting Russell Wilson, and just getting it over with right now rather than waiting until next year. It was the right choice, but now you have to rebuild. Now you have to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, build around this team. You drafted Bo Nix, and with that decision, I wasn't a huge fan of it just because it doesn't move the needle too much for me, in all honesty. I know he has a lot more experience than regular rookie quarterbacks do, but at the same time, my biggest thing, I'm sure you guys all know it, I don't like rookie quarterbacks in bad situations where they don't have a great amount of support. And I know that's ideally what you want to do. Not everybody can jump into a situation where you're Caleb Williams, you have Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, and they draft Rome Odunze, but that's how really good organizations do it, and it almost seems like an oxymoron when I'm mentioning the Chicago Bears in a statement talking about really good organizations on how they develop quarterbacks, but Ryan Poole and that organization really did it very well this offseason, and that's why I'm not surprised at all that they're going to have a great season. But in terms of the Broncos, it just doesn't move the needle too much for me. And in terms of other moves on their offseason, they had to release Jeffrey Simmons, like I mentioned, or Justin Simmons, excuse me, because of the size of his contract. It just wasn't going to fit with their salary cap. And also, in terms of bringing in other players, they signed Zach Wilson, they signed Josh Reynolds. Very solid pieces, or at least Josh Reynolds is. The trial's still out, I guess, on Zach Wilson. But regardless of that, I like that they drafted Troy Franklin. Marvin Mims seems to be like a solid piece for them. But overall, not too much movement this offseason for the Broncos because quite honestly, they just couldn't do too much because of that hole that they are with their salary cap. So they're at a C for me, average. They did all right, I guess, but there's still things to certainly be worked out here in the next few months and really in the next few years before they get their contentional status back. Moving on to the next team, I have the Las Vegas Raiders. Only slightly above the Denver Broncos because everyone's going to point to that quarterback not being addressed really in the offseason. They really couldn't have addressed it any better, I believe. Because of where they were in the draft, where they were in free agency, they decided to go after Christian Wilkins. And although I love that move, I love him being paired up with Max Crosby. People will say it was a little expensive, and I do see that, but this team needed elite pass rushing help for Max Crosby to really make it a strong point of their team. They have that now in an elite duo in both of them to sort of cover up a little bit of their secondary deficiency. So I really like the move, but I can understand people having questions about the price tag. Then also, outside of not really addressing the quarterback, they did a very good job of getting better around him. Like I just finished saying with the Broncos, they brought in Brock Bowers, adding him to a very talented pool of players that they have with Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, Michael Mayer. Brock Bowers is added to that group now. I really like their pieces around the quarterback, but it's just a toss-up right now according to sources on who the quarterback's going to be. Do you go with the experience of Minshew or Aiden O'Connell and how good you felt, how he has the backing of players in the Raiders organization? Eric says, why didn't the Raiders trade up to get a better quarterback in the draft? Pretty shocking. I really felt that they were. I don't know how many of you guys are aware or how aware you are, Eric, about the relationship with Antonio Pierce and Jaden Daniels. I really wanted that to happen. I really thought it would be cool to see how Antonio Pierce was at Arizona State and he recruited Jaden Daniels to go there, and if they would have met up in the NFL and he would have been coaching him, I thought that would have been awesome for them to do, but they clearly didn't see the more of a benefit in doing that. They probably would have had to trade a lot considering he went number 2, and they probably just didn't feel it was worth it at that point. They probably felt all right with Aiden O'Connell and having Gardner Minshew, so you can understand it, but again, like you mentioned, ideally, if I were them, I would have liked to have traded up to get a quarterback, most likely. But in saying that, I wasn't too big a fan of Bo Nix, so it would have had to have been a guy like a JJ, a Michael Penix, or something like that for me to feel comfortable about it. But I do see your point. I was also pretty surprised that they didn't do too much more. And just overall, some other positive things the Raiders did was sign offensive lineman Cody Whitehair and re-sign their center Andre James to improve that offensive line a little bit more. Then, with them getting a C+, the next team I wanted to bring up was the Los Angeles Chargers, and they got a B in my grade. Eric says, "Dang, I didn't know that. Wow, I think the Raiders are closer than the Commanders in terms of success." That's a pretty bold statement, Eric. I don't know. I think I'm just a bigger fan of the Commanders because they got Jaden Daniels, because of how he fits with that team. I like that they added a lot this offseason, the Commanders did, and they're in a weird spot where a lot of people don't really buy into what they're doing, but at the same time, you look at where the Giants are in their team, you look at where the Cowboys are. I don't think the Cowboys are going to be very good this year. In terms of the regular season even, I think they've done a bad job this offseason, and even the Philadelphia Eagles are the only team that, to me, seems like a complete team, so I can see the Commanders competing in that division a little bit more than maybe I see the Raiders, but at the same time, this division, the Broncos, the Chargers, you only really have the Chiefs at this point that we consider a solid threat in the AFC. They're in similar situations, I would agree with that, but I think I'm just giving the edge a little to the Commanders just because they got Jaden Daniels and the Raiders didn't. But talking about the Chargers and this new era around Jim Harbaugh, we've talked about the Chargers a good amount now, and I think all that being said, with the Chargers and everything that they had to deal with, some tough decisions in there, getting rid of Keenan Allen like you see on your screen, moving on from Austin Eckler, bringing in this new era with Jim Harbaugh, and bringing in players that fit his system or keeping players that fit what he wants to do in Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, bringing in guys like Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins. They also signed a new center, Bradley Bozeman, an experienced center at that, so it should help with bringing in this new group of players for the Los Angeles Chargers and Jim Harbaugh. Overall, I think they did a lot better with so little that they have. And in a tricky salary cap situation with Keenan Allen deciding to move on from him and just trading him, I think only for a third-round pick, couldn't have been easy, so credit goes to the Chargers. And I'm excited to see them because it seems very positive on what is coming out of their mandatory minicamp and their OTAs. Eric says, Tom Brady comes out of retirement to play for the Raiders. I had just joking. Imagine if he did that and if he became a part-time owner for them and he still came back and played for them. It wouldn't surprise me if Tom Brady unretired again. He can't stop talking about football. It's a good thing he's an announcer, but it wouldn't surprise me at all. I'm being serious if he came out of retirement. But sticking with the Chargers, just closing it out here for them. Good what they're doing. I like the rookies that they added. It seems like the rookies really are becoming a hot commodity for them. A lot of praise is coming for Joe Alt and also for Ladd McConkey, their second-round pick. They're feeling a lot more optimistic, I think, than other teams would. I feel like other teams would be saying things like, this is going to be a long process. We're just really starting to get the building blocks to all of this. But I think Jim Harbaugh has done a good job of invigorating this team with his energy on a positive outlook, and it feels like everybody is buying into that and really believing that they could do something this season where a lot of people don't believe that they can. I have my doubts, but who am I to question Jim Harbaugh coming off of a national championship? So I gave him a B. I think that was pretty solid for where they were. Then the last team, obviously, talking about the Kansas City Chiefs, I gave them an A-. They were crying out for a wide receiver last year, and they still wound up winning the Super Bowl. Doesn't really make any sense, but I guess that's just the Chiefs. It doesn't really make sense how great they are, or I guess it does if you just bring up Patrick Mahomes. Great quarterback, obviously, if you didn't know. But in terms of this offseason, they already had Rashee Rice to build off of last year as a rookie. He was very good for them, but now he has that other year of experience. I know there's those off-the-field issues that the Chiefs and Rashee Rice have to deal with, but he had a very good season on the field, so if you build off of that, he's going to be a good piece. Then you also look at the other pieces that they just added around him, because you look at Marquise Brown, you draft Xavier Worthy, absolute speed coming from both of those guys. Xavier Worthy broke the record for the 40-yard dash, and Marquise Brown also was the Cardinals' best receiver in a very poor offense. He definitely stuck out. He now goes to the Chiefs, and now they have two very good receivers to go along with Rashee Rice, and not to mention Travis Kelce also, if you forgot about him. And talking about long-term with the Chiefs, I don't think it's a bad idea to start looking for other weapons outside of Travis Kelce, not to mention or to put him in a conversation where he's not going to do anything, but it wouldn't hurt to start looking for younger guys like an Xavier Worthy, Marquise Brown, maybe somebody else you find later on, to start taking the pressure off of Travis Kelce a little bit, because he undoubtedly is closer to the end of his career than the start or the prime of it. Eric says, what are their chances at a three-peat? I think they're very good. Like I mentioned, they had no receivers last year, or at least receivers that you wouldn't put them in a category of, yeah, the Chiefs have this receiver, they're a A1 elite wide receiver. They really didn't have any of that. Rashee Rice was a solid piece as he came along, but now they bring in guys like Worthy, Marquise Brown. Isaiah Pacheco is a running back that I don't think gets a lot of credit, as he should. Their offense is as close to perfect in what they're trying to run in their system as it can get. Of course, it's going to take some time with Xavier Worthy being a rookie, so you don't want to put too much pressure on him, and Marquise Brown coming into a new situation. But I think their chances, ironically, are somehow better than they were right after they won the Super Bowl. They somehow got drastically better, and with that, they kept Chris Jones also, which was a massive piece, one of their leaders of their entire team. You look back onto that Super Bowl and how he had that pressure on Brock Purdy that saved the touchdown for the San Francisco 49ers. So deciding between him and L'Jarius Sneed, it was going to be tough. It was always going to be tough, but I think they made the right choice. I think Chris Jones gives you more positives, more benefits out of him than I think L'Jarius Sneed would. So that's another decision in free agency that they had to resolve. And Travis Kelce getting older, does that play a factor? It does a little bit, because this year I think we started to see a little bit more of that on how their offense struggled a bit more. It didn't look very clean, very smooth, very effortless as it typically does, or as we became accustomed to seeing it in the past. Not to say that Travis can't contribute at all or anything like that, but if you could reserve him a little bit more, not have him be the entire offense for the entire regular season, if he could really blossom and really produce in the playoffs where everything becomes amplified, slowly, if that becomes his role and he becomes that sort of closer to really perform in the playoffs, I think that would be ideally where his situation goes. And I think that's just natural for any team. As they get more successful, they try and find other playmakers, and I think the Chiefs did a very good job of that in this free agency. But that'll do it for this series. That'll do it for this segment. Let me know what you guys think of those grades that I gave the Chiefs, the Broncos, the Raiders, and the Los Angeles Chargers. And I'll come up with another series, I'm sure, that I will start in a few days. But leave your thoughts in the chat box or in the comment section after the show. But on that note, we do have one more segment to get to. We do have one more thing to talk about. The idea of the Minnesota Vikings having potentially 3 1,000-yard receivers on their team. It seems unlikely with who's going to be the quarterback, but I think at the wide receiver position, or just receiver position in general, they're very talented. I don't think they're getting enough credit, and I'll give you guys those reasons after we return from this break. So we'll be right back to talk some more about the Minnesota Vikings.